You can't? Welcome to Hooksett School District Safety and Wellbeing Forum. Now, those of you who know me, you can't put a mic in my hand. I told, this whole evening was planned by the Hooksett administrators, members of the Hooksett Police Department, members of the Hooksett Fire Department. Assistant Superintendent Marge Pollock was part of it. Did I hit everybody, Brad? And was very skillfully orchestrated by Brad Larkey. I think they deserve a round of applause, especially Brad. Now, I told everybody that would have 10,000 people here. And what you may want to do, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds, if you'd like. I'm like one of those guys that sits in the last row at the last. If you'd like and you all want to move forward, it might be easier for the panelists to be talking directly to you. If you don't want to, don't. That's the teacher in me. Okay, I can see nobody follows directions. So what tonight is going to look like is this. We have a keynote speaker who we're very pleased to bring to Hooksett, who I'm going to introduce in a minute, with a powerful message. After our keynote speaker, we do have a panel assembled, and each member of that panel is going to talk to an issue that we believe parents have indicated is of importance. We'll go right through that panel. It will take about 10 hours and 15 minutes. When we're done, I'll get up and maybe give you a couple of concluding remarks. The panel is going to stay. So at the end of the presentations, you can feel free to come up and rub shoulders with these people, maybe ask some questions individually that you have, but we plan on having that be part of what we do, is get up close and have you have access to that panel. At the conclusion in your packet, there is a survey, and we're going to ask you to complete that survey. And that survey is going to be analyzed by the PTA, who, without help and their assistance and the great ideas they brought to the table, tonight would not have been possible. So they've done a fantastic job. They've been great partners in this effort. We're going to, from what I hear from the PTA, that survey is your exit ticket. I'm right? Like, if you don't fill out the survey and give it to the PTA, you can't go. And you have to stay here all night. With that, I would like to introduce our keynote. I'm really pleased to welcome John Broderick to the Hooksett School District. Mr. Broderick is the Senior Director of External Affairs at Dartmouth-Hitchcock and formerly served as Chief Justice of the New Hampshire Supreme Court. For the past 2 years, he has traveled throughout New Hampshire and Vermont on a mission to change the culture and conversation around mental illness in an effort to destigmatize it. He said it is the most important work he has done in his entire professional life. It is now my pleasure to introduce John Broderick.
Stand out here if I can. Can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me? You may grow to regret that, but right now it seems like a good idea. Thank you very much to the superintendent for inviting me here tonight, and for all of you for coming out. It's a cold night out there. I appreciate it. The superintendent told me, I think, that I had 3 hours or 3.5 hours. Maybe I misunderstood it. I won't do that to you. But I am really pleased to be here. I've had some amazing professional opportunities in my lifetime. But the reason I'm Hooksett tonight is the most important thing I have done in my entire professional life, and I do not say that lightly. For the last 31 months now, I've been on a mission really to change the conversation and the culture around mental illness, because we need to. I grew up, by the way, in Massachusetts. Someone has to grow up in Massachusetts. It was me. I lived in a town of 20,000 people. Everyone in my town had perfect mental health. Isn't that amazing? And every marriage in my town was happy. I actually believe that. I don't live in that bubble anymore, but that's the bubble I grew up in. And in that bubble, no one ever talked about mental illness. It just wasn't a conversation that you could have. I grew up in a town about 12 miles north of Boston, a very middle-class town. My dad was a high school teacher. My mother worked in an office in the neighboring town. My best friend when I was 10 years old lived right across the street from my house. His father was a graduate of MIT. In my childhood, in my neighborhood, MIT was rockstar status. His uncle, his father's brother, never finished high school. He was an inpatient at the Danvers Mental Hospital in Danvers, Massachusetts. Every adult who ever spoke of that place, and every kid, including me, used to refer to it as the nut house, because that was funny. All these years later, looking back, I think, how unfair was that to the people who were confined or treated there, and to all the people that loved those people who were confined or treated there, but that's what we called it. And in the summer, often on Sundays, my friend's father would pick his brother up at the nut house and bring him to their house across the street. I was 10. I can still see in my mind's eye that man standing by their garage looking at the flowers. He never looked at me, never spoke to me, never gestured to me, but he was pretty scary. I thought he was, after all, in the nut house. And on those warm Sundays, I never had the courage to leave the safety, that's how I viewed it, by the way, the safety of my front yard to play with my friend. I just didn't. And when that man left our neighborhood late on those warm Sundays, I felt a sense of relief that he was gone. I thought they had people like that locked up to protect us. And I knew even as a 10-year-old kid that I would never know anyone or see anyone again with a mental health problem. I was wrong about that. It's one of the reasons I spent the last 2.5 years speaking wherever I'm at. I see it now. Some decades after that childhood that I described, in a different state, namely this state, in a different community, Manchester, and on a street somewhat different than the one I grew up on, mental illness crossed that road from my childhood and took up residence in my own house. It was disguised, undetected, unseen for what it was. My wife and I are baby boomers. We knew nothing about mental illness, nothing. But it was in my house and it was growing. I had 2 sons, 11 and 13. It took up residence in my 13-year-old son. He didn't know he had a mental health problem. Makes sense when you think about it. How would you know? Just how you feel, how you react, how you see the world around you. And we didn't see it. My son went to St. Joseph's Junior High School in the city, and when he graduated, it was on a Saturday. He woke up and told my wife and me he didn't want to go to his graduation. And we thought, it's a Saturday, he didn't want to be bothered with it. That wasn't why, by the way, but I didn't know it then. And we said, you have to go to your graduation, and so he went. He wasn't happy about it, but he went. He was a really good artist, my son, and so he spent a lot of time in his bedroom with the door closed at his desk, drawing. Today I would describe it as withdrawing, but I was pretty ignorant about mental illness back then. I'm not ignorant now, by the way. I'm not ignorant now. My son started smoking in high school. He kept that pretty well hidden. We didn't know that. He had friends at Trinity High School, but not as many as his younger brother. If you look at the yearbook at Trinity for the year he graduated, you'll find his photograph with all the other graduates. But if you look through the yearbook at the candid shot of the dances, the football games, you won't find his picture there because he wasn't there. He was probably home drawing or wood drawing. I didn't see it then. I see it now. He was pretty smart, my son. I thought he was quite smart. Not that it was reflected by his grades. He did okay, but not nearly as well as I thought he did that. But he always tested very well, and he got into a pretty good college in New York, and then off he went. Now, you may have heard this. I don't know if it's a rumor or it's true, but sometimes when kids go to college, they drink. Have you heard that? I think it could be true. In my son's case, unfortunately, it was true. And I can remember some of those weekend phone calls. I could hear it in his voice. I'd never heard that before. And it was pretty alarming to us. And I mentioned to him on the phone, and he said, Dad, I don't have a drinking issue. I don't have a drinking problem. And over time, my wife and I would be on that campus in New York, and eventually his classmates would seek us out to express their concern about his drinking. We'd talk to him about it. He'd say, Dad, I don't know why they do that. I don't drink more than anybody else does. I thought he must have, but I couldn't prove it or disprove it. He looked more disheveled than I had seen him, but he's in college. He's not dressing like me, thank God. But he seemed more disheveled than a lot of his classmates. And I said, well, he's away from home for the first time. He's in college. So we just used that as the best explanation. He graduated from college. I don't know how he did it. Looking back, knowing what I now know, I'm in awe of him. He must have willed himself to that degree. I didn't see it then. He did okay, but not great. But he tested well. And he got into a good graduate school in Boston. And then he came home. My wife and I were living in Manchester, so he lived with us. Commuted 3 days a week to classes to get his master's degree. At this point, it was obvious to us that he was drinking every day. He tried to hide it and disguise it, but he really couldn't. And so we talked to him about it. It's pretty alarming. And he would say, I don't have a drinking issue. We should start talking about it. And we must not have followed that advice. And so he got frustrated and moved north of Boston for the last 6 months to get his degree. I'm sure he continued to drink. He got his master's degree, knowing what I now know. I don't know how he did that. He must have just willed himself to get that degree. And when he graduated, he got a job very quickly. It didn't surprise me. He was really talented. He was a self-taught musician, a really terrific artist. He was the best read person I've ever known, then or now. He could talk to you about the Red Sox or Aristotle, whatever you wanted. Not because he read about Aristotle, but because he read Aristotle. He was funny and decent and good looking. It didn't surprise me that he got a job so quickly. It did surprise me that the job only lasted 4 weeks. Well, it wasn't his fault, he said, they lost the job. The second job took longer and lasted less time. But it wasn't his fault that he lost the job. And then his life had come to rust. And he was living with us. He was drinking while trying to disguise it. He was drawing. He would take graphic design classes. He always excelled at that. But his life was stationary. It wasn't going anywhere. And I was on the Supreme Court at the time, and I would drive to Concord every day where the court was and home. And I was worried about him all day long, thinking that we must have failed him somehow. His younger brother had gotten his master's degree, had gotten married, was moving ahead. My older son, smart and funny and talented, he was going backwards at 100 miles an hour, and he couldn't see it, and we couldn't stop it. And so finally, my wife and I reached out to the alcohol experts, and we told them what I've told all of you tonight. And they didn't hesitate, by the way. They said, Judge, your son is an alcoholic. That's what's happening here. And you and your wife really have two choices. You can put him out, literally, out. Let him hit bottom and hopefully turn his life around. I remember hearing that phrase in my childhood, hit bottom. Or you can let him stay in the house and he's going to die drinking again. Not tomorrow, or next month, or even next year, but you can't drink like he's drinking and have a long life. We didn't like those choices, by the way. My son used to say to his dad, if I didn't have these feelings, I wouldn't be drinking. We'd tell that to the alcohol experts, and they would say, Judge, every alcoholic has a reason they drink. You and your wife need to understand what's happening here. He's an alcoholic. He was so offended by that, my son. It seemed obvious to us. We didn't like the choices, so we finally persuaded him to go to alcohol rehab. Seems silly now, but he wouldn't even recognize he had a problem. He wasn't only going to do very well in rehab. And then he majored in alcohol rehab. New Hampshire, Connecticut, Cape Cod. Finally, he went to Florida to rehab. And my wife and I were praying against all odds that he has some insight about his drinking and come back ready to change his life. He came back all right. I met him when he came home. I met him at Logan Airport. He had been drinking on the plane on the way home. So obviously he hadn't taken. But he assured me he didn't have a drinking problem. And time just passed, and he wasn't moving, nothing was happening, the same habits day after day. So finally my wife and I had to make that choice, the choice we were told. And by the way, up to this point, no doctor, no neighbor, no friend, no family member, no one ever said, do you think your son could have a mental health problem? I never even thought of that. Seems hard to believe now, but I didn't. I probably would have been offended, actually, if you had said that to me. I realize now how silly that would have been. But we didn't see it. We saw alcohol. And my wife's not here tonight, by the way, so I'm not trying to look good in my wife's eyes. Not that I'm opposed to that, I'm just not doing it right now. But my wife is one of the kindest people on the planet. She really is. Considerate, compassionate. She'll be your friend. You'll have a friend you would keep your whole life. I tell you that because she and I were the decision tree on my son, and we love him. But we did the tough love thing, we thought. It was the hardest decision we ever made. It was the worst decision we ever made. So we put my son out, literally out. That seemed the only way to save his life. And so he was on the streets in Manchester. He slept at the shelter some nights, slept in his car, ate at the soup kitchen Sundays, and continued to drink. And after 3 weeks of dreading that phone call that no parent wants, we brought him home. We knew what that likely meant, but it was the only option at that point. He had called us a couple of times from the streets, I assume, and asked us to come home, and we said no. We said no. But we brought him home after 3 weeks. And his drinking continued just as it had been. I didn't know about his mental health problems then, and he couldn't really verbalize them. If I didn't have these feelings there. But looking back now, when he was out on the street, I'm sure his underlying mental health problems magnified. He was traumatized by that experience. And his drinking hadn't changed, so I'm sure he thought, they're going to put me out again, I can't do that. And he was scared to death, I think, that we would do that to him again, and he wasn't going to do that. So one night he assaulted me. I went to the ICU at the Elliott Hospital. I was in the ICU for 6 days, 8 days, I have no memory of that, but my wife does. I don't know how she survived it. My master's educated, decent, funny son was arraigned in a public courtroom, issued an orange jumpsuit, and sent to the Valley Street Jail. You don't want to go to the Valley Street Jail. And you surely don't want to go there if your father's a judge, I can tell you that. I didn't know that then. My wife said it was all over the news in New Hampshire and Boston. They wrote about it in the LA Times, the New York Times. While I was in the ICU, my doctors, 3 of them, went on the Today Show. So it wasn't exactly below the radar. People magazine reached out to my wife. Can you imagine that? She never returned that call. She said to me, I go home at night and there'd be 20 messages on the entry machine. I'd erase every one of them. She said, well, but I told people, well, but I said to them. She visited my son at the Valley Street Jail when I was in the ICU. And she said he was in a orange jumpsuit, his ankles were shackled, and he was pretty upset. And you say to her, is Dad okay? I can't believe I did that to Dad. I don't know why I did that to Dad. Just tell me he's going to be okay. I can never forgive myself. In the early days, she didn't know. He said, Mom, they won't allow visitors here very often, but on some afternoons, I can see the corner of the cemetery. If you went there, I could see it from my cell, and it would make me feel better. I'd know my family hadn't abandoned me. So my wife, by herself, would drive through that street corner. It was late March, early April, still kind of dreary. And she'd get out of the car and wave at the Valley Street Jail, give them a thumbs up sign. She said, I didn't know what window, what floor, even if she was looking back. And she'd drive home. She started to cry all the way home. It was so sad and so public. And I couldn't do anything. I didn't even know about it. The first time I knew I was in the hospital, they were pushing me upstairs to a room, and the fellow who was pushing the stretcher, I said, what am I doing in the hospital? He said, I think you fell. I had no memory of that, but I didn't have memory of anything. I felt pretty sore for someone who had fallen, but I accepted it. Anyway, the LA hospital was great to my family, and so I had this room, private room. And just a thought, by the way, when you visit people in the hospital, try not to say, I love your room. Okay? I hate it. But people tell me that. I hate it. I couldn't get out of bed for a week. Somebody came one day and they walked to the window, which seemed like a 2-day march to me. And they turned around and said, I love the view from your window. Try not to say those things when you visit people in the hospital. Anyway, after a day and a half, my wife and I were alone there, and she told me for the first time, as best she knew, what had happened. And the two of us just cried. I've been a lawyer and a judge my entire professional life, so I knew what it meant when she told me where my son was. For him, for us, for his brother, for our family. I didn't understand it. If I had any understanding, it would have been that alcohol, when it's abused, can take people to bad places. I didn't even think, maybe this has been in the newspaper. I'm glad I didn't think that. It would have been even harder. I don't know the technical definition of hopelessness, but I know what it feels like. That's what it feels like. It was the hardest time in my entire life. When I got out of the hospital, I wasn't allowed to visit my son at the Valley Street Jail. I would have, but the court wouldn't allow me to visit. So my wife would go by herself. Some days it was just too hard, and so friends who had known my son since he was young, they would go over to her place. After 6 months, he was taken one day from the jail to the courthouse in Manchester, in the basement courtroom with no windows, so he could be sentenced to the state prison. I hope you don't have that day in your life, by the way. I would have bet you everything I own that would never be my family. And it was. And there was still press there, that still newsworthy apparently. I didn't care at that point, but we were seated in the front row of the public section. And they brought my son in. He looked great. He hadn't had a drink in 6 months. He had civilian clothing on, I wouldn't see that for a while. And he walked right over to us, and I stood up and he gave me a big hug. He said, Dad, I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me? I can't forgive myself. I don't know why I did that to you. Just tell me you're going to be okay. I said, well, they tell me I'm going to be okay. I think I'm going to be okay. I said, look, we must have gotten into this as a family, and we're going to get out of it as a family. If you don't quit, I said, your mother and I won't quit. He said, I won't quit, Dad. Then he was sentenced to 7.5 for 15 years in the state prison. I don't know how we all didn't pass out. My master's educated, decent, funny, talented son was going to prison. The judge said, well, you served 6 months of the 7.5. I'm going to suspend 4 of those 7. You can serve those on parole if you're paroled. He was definitely going away for 3 years. And then suddenly he was gone. It was the longest ride home we've been there. Hopeless. Back then, on the court, 20% of my day job was hearing appeals from inmates, the very population with whom he'd be living 24/7. I wasn't really popular as a person. If that was your son, you'd lie awake at night too. After 30 days, they allowed us to visit. My son had to allow it. First 30 days, they evaluate every new inmate. What are their problems? Where should they live? What are their needs? Who are they? Anyway, after 30 days, we were invited up. We met in the secure psychiatric unit of the state prison. I know they do good work there, but it doesn't mean it's a happy place. It's very antiseptic, sterile feeling. Pushing heels on linoleum, steel on steel. It's not a welcoming place. My son wasn't housed there, but that's where the meeting took place. A psychiatrist, 2 social workers, my wife and me and my son. The psychiatrist started the meeting by saying, I really come to know your son the last 30 days. I really like him. He's very smart and funny. He's got every life skill you need to be successful. My wife and I said, I know we love our son, but we're in prison. He said, I know that. Let me tell you what's going on with your son. Your son has really serious depression. He has anxiety and panic attacks that are almost off the charts. And he said, Judge, if you had those problems and you thought it was just you, but you knew alcohol would help for a while and take away some of the pain, you'd be drinking too. So don't be too judgmental about it. He was self-medicating his mental illness. I'm not saying it was a good choice, Judge. I'm saying it was a logical choice. It was the only way to get relief. We're going to work with him here and see if we can turn his life around. I thought mental health problems were hopeless. They're far from hopeless. It was even more frightening to us than alcoholism. I remember thinking, maybe he never was an alcoholic. That's what we used to call him. But we didn't think they could really do much. We'd visit twice a week, that's what they allowed. After 4 months, we went one night, he came out and hugged us as he always did. He said, Dad, I feel so different. This wouldn't be different. He said, I haven't felt like this, Dad, since I was really little. I'm sleeping through the night now. My palms are not sweating all day long. My mind is not racing. I can focus that. I'm sleeping through the night. I haven't done that for years. I'm teaching in the prison day. I said, what are they doing for you? I said, well, I see a counselor here, Dad, and I take medication. I take it in the morning and the night. It changed my life. I knew then, when he told us that we had failed him. I should have known something about mental illness. I was the parent, after all. My son was like that for his time in the prison. Would have been like me in prison at that point. My son was married at the state prison. Anybody doing wedding planning here, I wouldn't pick that place. It would be my first choice. The only advantage of a prison wedding is it's pretty inexpensive. The receptions are very nice. Coca-Cola, potato chips. As weird as it may sound to all of you, it was the happiest day and the saddest place. I performed the wedding in a conference room off the main visiting room during visiting hours. The photographer was an inmate. My son said, Dad, don't ask him what he's doing at the prison. They don't ask. I said, I wasn't going to ask him, but I'm going to ask him what he charges. So they had a Polaroid camera. So he came in and I said, what's he charge for a picture? He said, I charge $1 a picture, sir. I said, you are my kind of wedding photographer. My son's wife had gotten her master's degree with him in Boston. She later won an Emmy in New England for her work on film and film editing. She was twice nominated. She won the Emmy up here. I've held the statue. It's the real deal. I'd keep it, but she won't let me. They have a 10-year-old daughter, my granddaughter. I'm her grandfather, so I'm totally objective about my granddaughter. But even if I weren't totally objective, oh my God, she's stunning me. Like a movie star child. Every time I hug that little girl, I say, you are a hero. From where we work and where we go. My son was paroled after 3 years. He deserved to be, but I was Chief Justice. I said, they won't do it because it looks like they favored the judge's son. And they did it. I've always respected the parole board that they did that. Channel 9 came up that day. There were 26 parole hearings. I only wanted to talk to my wife and me. That woman said, do you have anything you want to say? I said, actually, we do. Really happy my son's going to be leaving here and joining his wife. She was working at Dartmouth College. I said, I want to tell you something else. My son's not a bad person. He's not suddenly a good person. He's always been a good person. He's now well. And those are very different things, by the way. That first Thanksgiving, in 4 years, we were going to get something. He was in the passenger seat tapping his chest like this. He said, Dad, have you always felt like this? I said, what do you mean like this? He said, good, Dad, like I feel it. I said, I probably have. I knew I failed you. I should have known something. On that same trip, he said, Dad, you know, they gave me an IQ test at the prison. I knew he was smart. I said, how did you do on that? He said, I was 3 points below genius on the IQ test. So I smiled. I said, you couldn't be a genius? He said, Dad, my ankles were shackled. They were watching me through a two-way mirror. I must be worth 3 points. I said, okay, he's a genius. I don't know if he is or not. I know he's a lot smarter than I am. I know he's a good person. I wouldn't be here tonight, by the way, if my son said, Dad, stop talking about it. He doesn't. Every time I go out, he'll email me or call me and say, Dad, how did you do that? I'm proud of what you're doing. There are people in those rooms that are suffering or have someone at home suffering. I wouldn't be here if my wife said, stop talking about it. My son, who drank every day, had done a drink in 10 years. He said, Dad, I can spend the night in the liquor store with a drink. I don't have that time anymore. I'm not that person, Dad. I learned a lot about mental illness from him. A lot of other things too. But why am I here? I didn't do anything, by the way. Remember, I'm from that moment where no one talked about it. That was me, by the way. But in the aftermath of that, it was known, I guess, by a lot of people. I'd be at the grocery store, the gas station, it didn't matter. People would come up to me and say, Judge, how are you doing? You're looking good. I knew what they meant. I said, thank you, I'm feeling better. And I'd say, my son's doing better. Oh, I didn't want to ask. I said, that's okay. He had mental health problems. We didn't see them. He was drinking, that's what we saw. But he's doing much better now. And then every one of those people, a stranger to me, every one of them, would tell me a story about mental illness. The mother, the father, the cousin, the sister themselves. I heard about suicide. I had no idea. It opened my eyes. But I didn't do anything about it. I just wanted to pass. About 3.5 years ago, I got a call from Bill Gunn, who's just recently retired. He's a psychologist. He was head of behavioral health at Concord Hospital. He said, John, I have a friend. Her name is Barbara Van Dalen. She's a psychologist. She lives in Delaware, works in D.C. She wants to start a national public awareness campaign on mental illness. And she asked me, Bill Gunn, to chair it. New Hampshire's going to be the first state. And I told her I'd help, but I didn't know enough people. But I knew a guy who knew more people, and his family walked through the valley of mental illness very publicly. Maybe he'd help. She said, that's why I'm calling you. He said, would you be willing to call her? And to my surprise, I said, yes. That's not the rule I found. So I did what you would do. I Googled her first. Oh, come on, you're all Google her. So I Googled her, and I found out she'd been on Time Magazine's 100 list. 100 most influential people on the planet Earth. That's a tough call to make. But I figured I should get out of the way, so I called her. I said, Barbara, I understand you're on Time Magazine's 100 list in 2012. She was almost embarrassed. And I said, God, Barbara, you and I have so much in common. She said, what do you mean? I said, I'm 101, Barbara, on the 100. And she laughed like you did. And she should have. Then I liked it. I said, Barbara, what are you trying to do? She said, here it is, John. I want to make the 5 most common signs of mental illness as well known and as widely known as the signs of a heart attack or a stroke. I thought that was genius. She said to me, I bet you know a lot of the signs of a heart attack or a stroke. I bet you guys do too. I said, I do, Barbara, but I don't know. Why do I know that? She said, because it's a physical illness, John. It often affects people we love, and so now we call 911. We've learned about it. We've saved lives. I said, why don't I know the signs of mental illness, Barbara? She laughed. She said, John, it's mental illness. That's why you don't know. No one talks about it. We wall it off. We're ashamed of it. That would have been me, by the way. So I said, sure, I'll help. Then we had a former steering committee. Every single person I asked said yes. Every person. Some of them are household names in the state. Some of them you wouldn't know, but you know their job description. And everyone I asked had a mental health story. Every single person. Sometimes it was their family, sometimes it was their friends, or their neighbors, or their co-workers. My eyes were opening wider and wider. We had to raise $150,000. It took no time. First place I went was Jordan Thitcott. I didn't work there then. I barely knew the CEO. He gave me money in 5 minutes. Elliott Hospital gave me money. The New Hampshire Hospital Association gave me money. On a phone call, they gave me $40,000. It was stunning. We got to within $15,000 of our goal, and I called Governor Benson. I had a cell phone. He appointed me Chief Justice. I didn't know Governor Benson well. But I knew he was a wealthy man. I knew he did stuff for kids below the radar. So he answered the phone. I was shocked. So I said, Governor, I'd like to come see you. I told him what I was doing. And he said, that sounds like really important work, John. I said, I think it is, Governor. So can I come see you? He said, you don't have to come see me. He said, I'll send you a check. How far short are you? I said, we're $15,000 shy. He said, I'll send you a check. I wish I said $50,000. I was pretty naive back then. God liked me, sent the money. We then raised another $180,000 beyond that. Dartmouth Hitchcock gave me 110 of the $330,000 before I went to work for him. And then we had to launch this campaign on a Monday morning in May 2016, May 23rd, I'll never forget that day. People said, why don't you launch it in the House chamber in Concord? They're not in session. I said, there are 400 seats in there. There are not 400 people. Are you kidding? Nonpartisan, non-political, public awareness campaign kickoff on mental health awareness? You might be surprised. I think we got 15 or 20 people. We had 425 people. Monday morning, 10 a.m. The Catholic Bishop, the Episcopal Church, the Jewish community, the Attorney General, 3 members of the Supreme Court, every member of our congressional delegation, the governor. It was stunning. Mayors, law enforcement, hospital CEOs, and families. And I realized when we touched the nerve, this was a topic that touched people. Barbara Van Dalen was here that day, the genius behind the 5 signs, and she asked this question of that room. The most impressive room I had been in over 40 years in the state. She said, if there's anyone in this chamber this morning who's been untouched by mental illness, your family, your extended family, your friends, your neighbors, your group, if you've been untouched, she said, I'd like you to raise your hand. I had no idea what to expect. I never expected that no hand would go up. Every single person that they touched. I said to her later, Barbara, how's that possible? She said, time. It's mental illness. Just because people don't talk about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. She then shared these statistics, which will explain why I go to every school that asks me to come. Half of all mental illness in our country, half, arises by age 14. My son was 13 years old. 2/3 by age 23. Last year in our country, more people died by suicide, over 45,000, than in every car crash across our country, 38,000. Every 90 minutes in America, plus or minus, every day, every week, every month, some brave American veteran, he or she, takes their own life. We lose 20 veterans a day to suicide in America. We don't talk about that much. That's awkward. It's awkward. Last year, first responders, police. We lost more police in America to suicide than homicide. We don't talk about that much. It's awkward. Let's not go there. We need to start talking about it. And after that successful launch, we didn't have a manual. We didn't know what to do next. So we just froze in place, hoping that somebody would ask us to speak somewhere. In the last 31 months, I've spoken 338 times in 4 states now. I've traveled 60,000 miles just to New Hampshire. It's a bigger state than you think, by the way. You do what I've been doing. I've spoken to over 70,000 people. And it's not about me. Most of the people in life don't even know me and will never see me again. It's about this. One of the first schools I remember going to was Pembroke Academy, 840 kids, they told me. I was in the gym at 9 a.m., kids 9th through 12th grade. I'm on a 6-inch platform under the basketball net at the far end, nobody on the floor, kids on the bleachers. Remember those comfortable bleachers from high school? That's where they are. So I was behind a fixed podium with a gooseneck microphone. The ceiling was 50 feet high. I looked down at these kids at 9 a.m. and I thought, this is not going to work. They'll probably say, whose grandfather is this guy? While I was there then, I had to talk. I spoke for about 35 minutes and I thought, this is not going to work. They don't care. They told me to hear me. And then I finished. And the principal got up on the little platform. And there was dead silence in that gym for about 3 seconds. It seemed like 3 minutes. I thought, oh my God, this did not go well. And then almost all at once, 840 kids on both sides of that gym stood up and applauded for almost a minute. The principal said, I'm shocked by this. I said, you're shocked. I said, they're not applauding me. They don't even know me. They'll never see me again. But I'll tell you what they are applauding. This generation is smarter than I was. Some of these kids are suffering. Some of them, they love their suffering. They agree with me that it's time that we start talking about it, taking away the shame and the shadows. Who does that help? These kids are really different. I love this generation of kids, by the way. They're the least judgmental generation in the history of the United States. They want to change it. A few weeks after that, I was in the gym in Central New Hampshire, a big high school. Kids stood up and applauded. They're not applauding me. And afterwards, the kid comes out on the floor, a big guy, looked like a linebacker with papers. About 6'3", had long hair, shoulder length, baseball cap on backwards. He got about 2 feet from my face, his eyes were wet. He said, can I ask you a favor? I said, sure, what? He said, can I give you a hug? I said, you're 6'3", go ahead. He really hugged me too. And then he told me his own mental health story in about a minute. I remember thinking, oh my God, how are you in school? I said, hey, you may be the bravest guy I'm going to meet my whole life. Can I return the hug? He said, I'd love that. I'm hugging linebackers in high school, Jim. In the last 31 months, I have literally hugged hundreds and hundreds of kids in gyms and auditoriums who share with me the most personal information in their lives. They're suffering. And as touching as it is, it's sad to me. I'm a stranger to those kids. All I've said to them is, I won't be judging you. It's not your fault. It's a health problem. It's not a character flaw or personal deficiency. It's a health issue. And they open up. In the last month, I've hugged 4 or 5 high school students. One is youngest in 9th grade, who shared with me they tried to kill themselves in the last 12 months. I just hugged them. I say, you're getting treatment, you're getting help. All of them are. One girl said, I'm so happy I didn't succeed. I feel so different now. Why are we not talking about it? We need to. I was in Nashville at Bishop Burton High School. A junior girl came up to me after I spoke in the gym, and her eyes were wet. She said, you said something today that meant so much to me. I said, what was that? She said, well, you told us that you understand it's not okay to have a mental health problem. But then you said, but it's okay to have a mental health problem. You didn't choose it, not your fault. Help's available. She said, I don't hear that much. I just hear it's not okay. A sophomore girl a month ago came up after I spoke. She was crying. Tears were coming out of her face. She's never met me in her life, and she's opening up to me. She said, I think I have depression and anxiety. And I said, that's not easy, is it? She said, no. And I said, but the important thing is you know that. My son didn't know it, and I didn't see it. And they can help you. Are you getting help? No, she said. I said, well, smart people take care of their problems. You seem like a smart person to me. Why don't you talk to your parents? Tears coming down her face. She said, I spoke to my dad. I said, what did he tell you? She said, he just laughs at me. Just laughs at me. Other kids said, my parents don't believe in mental illness. I had a football player, a senior in high school, who had wet eyes. Said, I think I have some mental health issues. He said, have you talked to your parents? He said, oh, I could never talk to my parents. I said, would you see a counselor here at school? He said, okay. I said, that doesn't sound like you're committed to me. Are you going to do it? He said, I promise. I said, I used to be a judge, you know. You can't lie to a judge. He said, I'm not lying, Judge. He went. They don't know me. But they open. A kid from Berlin, New Hampshire, came up to me at the gym. He said, I'm a varsity athlete. I played 3 varsity sports here. I'm pretty popular with my classmates. I want to thank you for driving up here. I said, I'm happy to come. He said, I want to say I want to thank you. I said, sure. He said, after you spoke today, I realized that some of my classmates probably had mental health issues, and I'm pretty sure I've made fun of them. He said, I've been a real jerk. Imagine admitting that to somebody you've never met. He said, how do I make it up to them? I said, I think you just did, actually. Don't do it again. And if you hear someone else, speak up. My son tells me all the time, Dad, everyone with a mental health problem, I don't care what it is or what age they are, they have 2 things in common. Number 1, they didn't ask for it. That's true, by the way. And number 2, they don't deserve it. That's true, too. So what do the rest of us do? We make sure we stigmatize it. We want to make sure they feel badly about it. Why do we do that? Why do we do that? When I speak to adult audiences, I say we've been doing it for generations. There's got to be a good reason. Maybe somebody could tell me what it is, because I don't understand it. It won't surprise you to learn no one ever raised their hand, because there is no reason. Why do we tolerate that which we can't even explain? We've been doing it for generations in this country. It's time that we change that. Let me close with this. When I go around and I talk to high school kids especially, I say to them, you know, I need your help. It doesn't matter what I think. It really doesn't. It matters a lot what you think. And it matters a lot what these young people think. They're not like us. They're more open. I admire that about them. They're going to change it, by the way. And our job is to help them, not to block it. So I say you can change the culture if you want. It's not that hard if you want to. I say when I was 12 years old, my dad must have been paid on Thursdays. He felt flush with cash at the high school. So my mother, my father, my sister and I were getting his blue and palace Chevrolet, no seatbelts. They weren't important. And we'd go to a little restaurant in the center of town. Every table in that restaurant had an ashtray. Some had two. At some point during the night, every table was smoking. My mother and father both smoked. They loved my sister and myself as they blew smoke in our face across the table. And after 2 hours in that smoke chamber, disguised as a restaurant, we'd get back in my dad's car, which had an ashtray, by the way. Every car had an ashtray. And my parents' one of those would light up for the 2-mile drive home. It's a long trip if you smoke around. Every room in my house, my bedroom and my sister's were the only exceptions. Even our bathrooms had ashtrays. Every coffee table in America, every public school, every private building, every town hall, every airport, every airplane, they were everywhere. Ashtrays were everywhere. I aspired to be a smoker when I was 12. Have you seen an ashtray recently? Where are they? Something happened. If you smoke outside on the Boston Common, outside, it's a violation of the city ordinance. Unimaginable in my 12-year-old life. But that's where we are. I also tell them when I was 12, we had a black and white television set. And they look at me like, how old is this guy? And then you get even, I say, we had rabbit ears on the TV too. You have no idea what I'm talking about. I said, we must have survived. But some nights on that black and white television set, I would see African Americans peacefully marching. I didn't know why, I obviously know now. And some nights they'd be knocked around like bowling pins, struck by fire hoses, attacked by police cars, hit by billy clubs. That's alarming to watch at any age, but at 12 years old, I'm saying to my mother, where's that happening? She wasn't proud of it, she said, happening in her own country. If you had said to me after one of those huge protests when I was 12, John, you think in your lifetime we will have somebody with a black face as President of the United States? I was betting my ashtray, that never happened. Thank you, Barack Obama. I never met Senator Obama. I was Chief Justice when he was running. My mother had passed by then, but her voice remained. And when he won that night, she said to me, you better be down there. You better be down there. She would have been. And so I bought an airline ticket, and I flew there. It had only been 232 years since we declared our independence from Great Britain, and this had never happened in America. It was more rare than a total eclipse. I wanted to experience it. And so there I was, on Inauguration Day, on the mall in Washington with 1.3 million of my closest friends. I was so far away from Barack Obama, he looked 2 inches taller from where I was. But on the Jumbotron, he was 15 feet tall. So I watched it there. I thought a lot about my mother that day, and how proud she would have been of this country, and how unimaginable this would have been to her. I thought it would be unimaginable to me. In less than a minute, after 232 years, in that voice I'd come to recognize, Barack Hussein Obama with a funny name and a black face was sworn in as President of the United States and leader of the free world. Don't tell me we can't change. Don't tell me culture can't change. If we can eliminate ashtrays from the world I grew up in, well, I aspire to use one. If we can elect somebody with a black face to 2 terms in the White House, my childhood memories where racism was often tolerated and sometimes applauded. If we can do that, we can do this. We can learn the 5 basic signs of mental illness and start a conversation without judgment or shame that has not existed since this country was founded. You know that's true. Why do we tolerate that? On the back of this card is something called REACT. Sergeant Pitcock and the Commissioner of Education, who's a huge fan of this campaign, have decided, what should we do if we see the signs? How do we react to them? When I was in high school, probably your memories too, there was always some kid or kids who sat alone in the lunchroom. They were the odd kids. Nobody went over to sit with them, I did. If fellow back in high school today, I hope I have the intelligence and the executive to get out of my chair before we say, can I sit with you at lunch until I can turn up? A lot of those kids had no help on. I didn't know it, thank you, no one talking about it. I have these cards, I hope you'll take them home, I hope you'll put them on your refrigerator. If you want more, you let me know, there's no charge. There's no charge. We've given out over 400,000 of these, by the way. I don't mean drop them from an airplane, I mean give them out. Some days, by the way, when I've been traveling, some days are longer than others. And I think maybe I'm on a pool side, maybe nobody cares, maybe it's just me. And then I had moments like 3 weeks ago in Salem. I was at middle school, spoke to 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and they listened to me. I am their grandfather. They listened. And when I was done, they were crying out of the gym. A 13-year-old boy, an 8th grader, approached me, extended his hand. I shook his hand and told me his name and his age, and he said, I really want to thank you for coming to my school and talking about this. He's in the 8th grade. I said, well, I was happy to come. He said, you know, they tell me that I'm on the spectrum myself. And I want you to know something. Your talk here today has changed my whole life. Can I give you a hug? He started to tear up. He hugged me. My eyes were wet. I hadn't changed his life, but in the moment, he felt safe to tell me where he was living. And he knew I would be fine with it. That's what we all need to be. I wasn't there for most of my life. I'm there now. I have hugged too many kids and seen too many tears to say, it's not a problem. It's a problem, folks, and we can address it, but not if we don't confront it. Anyway, thanks for listening. I appreciate it very much. Please take the card and leave. Thank you very much.
It's an evening you won't forget. It's a story you won't forget. I'd like to introduce our first panelist, who is Christine Gialusis. She's our Director of Student Services, who will be speaking to you about resources available at the national, state, and local level. Christine?
Tough to follow that. Can you all hear me okay? So we have a lot of people to speak to you tonight. I'm not going to go through single resource, but in your folders on your PowerPoints, there are 3 slides, one for the state level, one at the local level, and one at the national level, all in an effort to do exactly what Doug Broderick was just talking to you about, which is changing culture, getting people educated, understanding more about what we can do, how we can work together. On each slide, there are resources for you as a person, if you need crisis help, if you need to know who your local resources are in your community, if you're curious about legislature. At each level, I've included some of those resources. The list is exhaustive. It does not include specific doctors. Obviously, that's a resource for you as well to know who your own network of medical providers are, but this is more of a global scope. And we also did include Judge Broderick's website on there, on the state page, so if you wanted to take a closer look at that, that's on there. And locally, we also included the links to here in Hooksett, and also your Hooksett PTA did put together a pamphlet of local Hooksett-based resources for you as well that you can use when you exit. I do encourage you, depending on what it is that you're curious about, to delve deeper into the links that are included on the slides, depending on what it is that you're seeking to know more about. There's a wealth of information in there that can be used in a plethora of ways depending on what you're looking to learn more about. I think that's really all I'm going to say about the resources. Lots of people have lots to share with you, so I think you can explore. And come back to me if you have further questions.
For seeing everyone here. Can you hear me okay as well?
Yeah.
Excellent. Can you hear that? All right, well, again, thank you. My name is Dean Jory. I'm with New Hampshire Homeland Security Emergency Management. And both Scott and I work in the school emergency preparedness office. And on one of the slides, it'll tell you, okay, our office goes out, and if the state has any emergencies, they're there to help communities get the resources that they need and to assist them in the recovery. Most of what our office does with the school emergency preparedness is helps look at schools' security, where they're at the moment. Our program was developed in 2013. It was in response to the Sandy Hook school shooting, and Governor Hassan said we need to do something here in New Hampshire, and so the program was developed. There was a fellow that used to go around to all the schools in the state and talk about all hazards. This one became more focused on school violence, school shootings, and the program was developed. It involves, as it says up there, the school security assessments, where we go and look at the facilities and we talk about the tools that they have for their use, for the layers of security to meet whatever challenges or obstacles they have at the schools. We talk about the threats that are outside. We talk about the threats that are inside, and that's where it becomes important there to identify what schools are doing for the mental health, for the emergency operations, to address students who are at risk, and develop the relationships between police and fire and the schools. And we kind of help coordinate that through our discussions as well. We help with the school emergency operations, the emergency operations plan that all schools in New Hampshire are required to have by RSA now. So we have developed templates for them, and we, again, now the police and fire have to review, look at those. So we, again, work on those relationships. Training and exercises. Our office will do some basic workshop trainings we offer to the schools, and we also have another office that we work with that focuses solely on training and exercises. And we have a gentleman there currently who focuses solely on school training and exercises. So the school in your community says, we'd like to do a tabletop exercise on what do we do if there's a hazmat spill. We talk with that fella, and he'll start coordinating it, and we'll come in. And all the things we do, just to be clear, all the things we do are not guided by codes. We don't enforce codes. We don't come in and say you have to. We don't do any mandatory. It's all voluntary. It's all, we get invited in, and then we tell you, okay, here's what we can provide, and here's what we'd like to do. And so far, we've been relatively successful. I will say, we're beyond 90% for all public charter schools in New Hampshire having at least an initial security assessment. And we recommend that happens every 3 years, and we've begun that second round. So we're on our way now to revisiting those schools, seeing what improvements have been done. And there's the emergency operations plans role. We help them develop and identify the trends and resources that we can provide for them. Next slide. Great. So one of the things we were involved in was the school safety preparedness task force that the governor had requested, and so as you see there, 76-page report, a bunch of subgroups were developed to identify new technologies, responses, mental health was a specific one, and it came up with 59 recommendations. You can see the link up there. I know on the slide you provided, it's pretty small, but there's a link there that will take you to that report if you're interested in looking at that. And those recommendations, so it talks about what each subgroup and task force discussed, what it revolved around, and then it came up with those 59 recommendations, and they covered the areas like legislative. Are we going to change the fire drills, take some of those drills and move them towards lockdowns or shelter in place? So that's a legislative item, and it has to be acted on that way. Mental health, so they started talking about how do we incorporate more programs in the schools? How can the schools support community mental health and work together with that? So they talk about those areas. Planning, that goes back to the emergency operations plans. Training, talks about, okay, how do we respond when these issues come up? What about the warm zone EMS? There might be some more talk about that this evening. We talk about the go kits in each classroom. What do we have in those? So that's what they talk about, recommended in planning. Training, talk about a little bit of what we talked about in regards to what is offered from the state, what can they do to identify at-risk students. It crosses over into there. Exercises are very similar. Communications talks about the mass notification, how do we reach out to all people. And there's several recommendations in each of those areas. The last one, facilities upgrades. What can we do to improve the security for the facility on the outside and on the inside? And so that's the kind of thing that when we go out to schools, we have our discussions with. We usually get a pretty good panel between the administrations and safety staff, team members for that school, our office, police, fire, maybe an emergency management director for the community, and a pretty good discussion. And then we prepare a report. The schools have that as another tool to look at and say, okay, here's one way that's been suggested to help keep our schools safe. And then look at that. As I said, we use language like consider this and we see just that. And most of what we look at, we compare nationally. We say, are we communicating the same message that they get nationally? And there are sites that we talk with, and we find that nationally, New Hampshire is doing very well in conveying the message, and the message that we're conveying is very similar across the U.S. So I think we're pretty confident that what we're delivering to the schools is a good product. But definitely check out the Governor's Task Force report if you get the chance. And thank you very much for listening to our what we do.
I better not touch it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about EOPs and what that means for the Hooksett schools. I'm Ben Lloyd, the principal at Fred C. Underhill School. So I'm going to keep the EOP part of it short. It is a mouthful, so I'm just going to refer to it as EOP. Our EOPs are part of national preparedness efforts to ensure that schools' plans are aligned with national, state, and local emergency practices. Again, they are required by law. The EOP enables our schools to, play a key role in taking preventative and protective measures during the course of an incident or an emergency. We can do certain things that can prevent things from happening or to, protect against certain threats. Or sometimes we can do things that can minimize the impact of an incident as well. Schools oftentimes are the first people to provide first aid during an incident. We also notify emergency agencies and provide instructions before first responders arrive through our EOPs. We also work with our response partners to provide a united and organized response is incredibly important during an incident, and we've learned this, through some limited experience at Underhill this year. That it is important to have clear lines of communication, and to have consistency, and to have a chain of command. So I'll get into that a little bit in the next few slides. So the National Preparedness Goal is organized into 5 mission areas. It's prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. Emergency management officials and emergency responders who engage with the schools are familiar with this terminology, so it's really important that we're all on the same page with that language. The mission areas are generally aligned with 3 time frames associated with an incident. There's before, during, and after. And prevention, protection, mitigation occurs before an incident, response occurs during an incident, and recovery occurs after an incident. So again, our EOPs are developed in accordance with federal directives, policies, and requirements. Development of an EOP is a multi-step process. It involves teamwork, collaboration. We go through and identify potential threats and hazards, and it is unique to each individual school based on where they're situated, where they're located, and what's around them in their environment. And we assess the risks. We also establish goals and identify courses of action during the event of an emergency. What should you do? And once a plan has been written, we distribute it to key officials, to the state level, but also to our local officials, so that we're all on the same page. And we also go through and implement the EOP. We exercise it, we run through drills, and we assess situations, and we determine if we need to make changes. And sometimes, based on what we see in current events, other situations in other school systems, things in the media, we're able to learn from those experiences as well and make adaptations or adjustments to our EOPs, and then communicate that to local officials. The key features of an EOP, we have an incident command system, and every school has an incident commander, and we have other roles and responsibilities assigned so that there is a clear chain of command. We also go through our emergency response actions, which Steve is going to talk about in a little bit, and those are clearly spelled out, communicated, and practiced regularly over the course of the school year, and we do change them from time to time based on things that we learn and our assessment of how things are going.
I don't think I need 2 mics, but yell louder than this. Thank you, Ben. Ben actually touched upon the subject that I'm going to be hitting, and that is those regularly scheduled practice drills that we have. We've worked along with the Department of Homeland Security, Hooksett Police, Hooksett Fire, and those groups to really develop and fine-tune the plans that we do have. Our students, our staff, substitutes, volunteers are made aware of these plans, and we do practice them on a regular interval throughout the school year. Please understand that as we walk through this, there are some things that are kind of more confidential. We keep them a little bit closer to us, just for the safety and well-being of all individuals. So if you look, there's a list that's up on the screen now. From drop, cover, and hold, which would cover situations where we may be protecting ourselves from, in bad weather outside. We're trying to protect those kids inside. I'm going to turn this off. To things like secure campus, where we might lock down the campus, if you will, or secure that, both protecting us from something outside of the building, whether it be a person that's concerning, or even if there's an animal or something that's around the building. In some cases, it's a medical issue that's occurring within the building, and we're just securing that building so that we have the privacy and medical staff can go from where they need to be. There's things like shelter in place. Again, that's keeping the kids where they are supposed to be in their classrooms, and then securing that room depending upon the event that is actually occurring. We secure the room differently, and our staff is aware of that situation. Lockdowns, again, activated. Sometimes you need to secure the students in the room, keeping them potentially from any type of intruder that might be in the building, or again, any other situation where you want to keep them in one location that's safe. Things we're more familiar with, and from our generation, if you will, the fire drills and the evacuations that we have. Those are the typical things where we practice time and time again throughout the year to be able to get securely, safely out of the building and to account for everybody as quickly as possible. We find that to be a very important piece. I know whenever we have Hooksett Fire and Police coming to us, we want to assure that we have all souls out of the building, or that somebody is trapped or we can't account for them, so we begin a different search. We also practice drills, things like a reverse evacuation, so that if we're ever outside of the building, we can quickly get back into the building. And the students are aware of how to do that, staff are aware. And the last couple of things, scan, I always think of the example of being like in an airport terminal. They say, be aware of your surroundings. Does anything look different? Sometimes there's that need to ask teachers and staff, like, hey, does anything look strange in your room, something that you're not recognizing as belonging in your classroom? Again, we tell them not to touch anything if you don't want them to. And then finally, and we found this to be important too, the bus evacuations and bus security, because our students don't just come and are in our buildings 24/7 or for the full day. They're also traveling back and forth. So we need to make sure that they are aware of security and safety as they're moving from one point to another.
My name is Matt Benson. I'm the principal here at the David R. Call Middle School. My section is communication and upgrades. Our stakeholders in the school building are students. This year, the Hooksett principals and last year started making a dedicated push to informing our students. And we've always practiced our drills, but informing our students and communicating to them at the beginning of the year, quarterly, trimester, as they go throughout. We've done this year in small groups. We've done this through grade levels and certainly within classrooms. In each of the classrooms, there is a color poster, I believe, that we got from the Department of Homeland Security with these drills listed on it. And students are, we really stress this year of asking questions after a drill. When a drill happens, and we go through a drill, stop, ask questions, review the drill, and that's a big push at all three of our schools. Our rallying points, so it's just not practicing drills in the school, but it's also practicing drills outside the school. We've done this presentation for all school staff, and as far as their communicating and educating them about drills, and also substitute teachers and working with the bus company. We've said at the beginning of the school year, we communicated out an emergency guide for parents that I believe is in the packet for the Hooksett School District, that we continually, that ongoing communication to inform our public, our parents, and obviously our students. The upgrades that we're very proud of, I believe you've seen some of the information from home and press releases. We now have walkie-talkies in the district that are able to communicate throughout all three schools and with the superintendent's office. Our school resource officer also has that walkie-talkie, so he's able to travel so he's able to hear communication through all the schools. Many times we support each other, all three schools support each other. If there was an emergency event that happened, and that communication is essential, not only protecting the students in our individual buildings, but certainly the other buildings in the school district. The video surveillance system was installed this year, and this again, is another safety piece for ongoing monitoring of our egresses and throughout the buildings, and entry points to the outside of the building, the inside of the building, and key access points. The shooter detection system was installed. We have a representative, Matt Christie, from the shooter detection system tonight who will elaborate on that. And that was one of the first in the state of New Hampshire to install that in the school district. So Hooksett School District should be very proud of that. It's a credit to our Hooksett School Board for proposing that and bringing that forward. We worked, the Underhill proposed upgrades, I have a slide on that next, but we worked diligently with Homeland Security, and as you can kind of see a common theme, working with fire, police, Homeland Security, shooter detection system, and in renumbering our doors and windows. We all are very clear on the numbering system, so Homeland Security, Hooksett Fire, Hooksett Police, State Police all understand exactly if there was a situation that the doors are crystal clear and the windows are crystal clearly numbered for identification. Hooksett School Board goal this year was the attention to the security for after-school activities in summer. The three principals have met with HYA and individual organizations within their building to develop guidelines and restrict access to parts of the building that aren't being used. I understand it's a school community. We want the public to use our buildings, but we certainly have to be mindful of what's going on after school hours and during summer hours with locking doors and being aware of who's entering our building during those times when school is not in session. The proposed upgrades at Underhill, which is part of the building renovation that will be on the ballot, the warrant article is, as they're proposed, but again, it's that forward-thinking, Mr. Lloyd, Dr. Littlefield, and the Hooksett School Board in developing these, removing the portable building, securing all students in one building is a big safety and security concern to get all of those K through 2 students and staff and in one building. Reconfiguring the bus loop and access road for safety, and I'm sure, again, we'll be working with Hooksett Fire and Police and identifying those key access points if there was an emergency. Redesigning the exterior lighting to increase visibility. As you know, it's the students at Underhill, staff, they leave when it gets dark out, obviously in November at 4 o'clock, 4:15. Some probably enter in the early morning. So increasing that lighting for safety and security for the individuals that are at Underhill. Placing the boulders, concrete-filled barriers, or similar measures to provide additional safety and security. Again, that's a recommendation for the Department of Homeland Security. Repairing fencing, and I missed the protection of the propane delivery system. Repairing the fencing around the campus. In addition, reconfiguring the front entrance of Underhill, and again, safety and security with all that in mind as the proposed upgrades.
Thank you. My name is Matt Christie. I work for Shooter Detection Systems. I joined SDS back in July as a K-12 specialist. Before SDS, I worked as a police officer down in Massachusetts for about 8 years. And when I left policing, I wanted to stay within public safety and thought, really what could be better than helping to protect our children, in the school system. I'm extremely grateful to be invited here. We feel that we have a technology that enables first responders with the information that they need when responding to an active shooter situation. Not really news to anybody here. Active shooters are on the rise. I think when I was a kid, it was something I'd hear about maybe on an annual basis, and sadly, it's something you hear about on, just about every week. Gunshot detection was actually invented in Cambridge, Mass. at a company called BBN Technologies back in the early 90s. My CEO, Chris Connors, worked there, and initially it was developed just for the military. We were losing a lot of troops overseas to sniper fire, and having gunshot detection installed on the back of the Humvees were protecting the troops in the field. Just after Sandy Hook, my CEO, his daughter came home from school and said she was afraid that she had to hide underneath her desk during one of the active shooter trainings. And he thought, let's take some of that technology through Boomerang, that military gunshot detection device, and create a Guardian system. You can see Guardian, it's actually installed here on the wall, on the back. And it uses the same type of technology that was used in the battlefield. So, that's why we're here tonight. We are here tonight. As many of you know, in their efforts to improve safety and security of Hooksett schools, Hooksett has installed our indoor gunshot detection into all the schools throughout Hooksett. Although we have many schools on board within New England and across the country, Hooksett has become the first in the state to install it into New Hampshire. We're extremely grateful for their foresight and the support of the technology, and we hope Hooksett will become a place for other New Hampshire schools to come and learn about the technology and hopefully implement it into their schools. Just a little bit of how the sensor actually works. If, God forbid, someone comes in, fires a shot, the infrared coming out of the muzzle will be detected by our sensor, and then it gets authenticated, listening for the sound of the gunshot. So that's all done within a second, and within 3 seconds, alert goes out to police, staff, and as well as on the intercom systems. Police actually have it installed in their dispatch center, so if a shot was to go off, they would have an exact location of the shooter, and as well as a visual of that shooter once the camera systems are integrated with our system. So, tactically, they can then come to the school and put an end to that threat, knowing the exact location of that shooter. Thanks again for inviting us to participate, and I definitely look forward to answering some of the questions after all the presentations are done.
I'm Justin Sargent. I'm a lieutenant here at the Hooksett Police Department, and I'm going to keep this nice and short. Basically, what we provide for the community here, especially the schools, we have an SRO. It's a school resource officer. Many of you might have met him, Officer Blanchett. You can find him in the schools throughout the course of the week. Some of your kids may even know him. He's a great resource that we utilize. He gets to know your kids. He gets to listen to their problems and help them out as he can. He's also a pretty important resource for the schools and their principals and the teachers, as he's able to kind of deal with the day-to-day problems that arise in the school. So besides that, we also train as a police department. We have policies, procedures, which govern our responses to an active shooter, bomb threat, barricaded subject, those types of things. And we practice them throughout the year, not only by ourselves as a police department, but we practice them with the fire department and the school administrators. Just yesterday we had a tabletop exercise, which basically is just a broad overview of something were to happen, so we prepare so that if it does happen, we're ready for something like that to happen. And then finally, Matt just talked about the shooter detection system. We do have that in our police department. It's a computer screen that is monitored by our dispatchers 24/7. If it goes off, it lets us know where the shot was last fired, so we know where to head. Because when we're coming to the school, our primary objective is to get into the school and to stop the shooting, and that definitely helps us. So that's a good piece of equipment that the school board has purchased, and that's pretty much it. I can answer any other questions you may have afterwards.
Good evening. My name.
Good evening. My name is Captain Stalker. I've been with the Hooksett Fire Department for the past 15 years. Currently, the position I hold is Administrative Captain of EMS, managing the emergency medical services for the department. Just a brief overview of our department. We have 32 members staffing 2 stations. We have 6 to 8 personnel on duty at any given time. And in the past year, we responded to 2,000 386 emergencies in 2018. On a consistent basis, that has been on the incline. The fire service has drastically changed within the past 20 years. No longer are we just responding to responding to emergencies and putting out fires. We're responding to various types of incidences involving hazmat scenarios, any and all types of rescue scenarios involving both people and animals. We get a lot of non-emergent requests for service. We're also the first people to respond to terrorism, to natural disasters, and most commonly providing emergency medical services to the town for emergency medical calls. In fact, 2018, 66% of calls that we performed were medical emergencies. But with the increase in these various emergencies that we respond to, it's become more important than ever to adequately prepare and train for these types of emergencies, as well as provide proactive and preventative services to keep the community and school safe. In relation to school and safety readiness, there are various planning and preparedness steps that we do. We have drafted pre-plans for all 3 schools that can be used for any type of emergencies. We participate in monthly fire drills, lockdown drills. We perform AED maintenance for the schools. Just recently, we've distributed first aid and stop the bleed kits for all 3 schools. So in the event of an active shooter, the necessary and life-saving medical equipment is readily available for bystanders to use and hopefully to save a life. We also perform frequent building walkthroughs so our personnel have a good knowledge of the building layout, the utilities, possible hazards, and most importantly, we train on a daily basis. For example, our department has begun training and drilling on active shooter events, which we've talked about here. These types of events have become a new and unfortunate reality that first responders have to be ready for. Prior to last year, the fire and EMS response to such an event would involve us staging at a distance and waiting for the incident to resolve and the police to deem the scene safe, and then we would come in and provide our services. The problem with that is people were dying, and these people were savable. And so this is no longer the model. Last year, our department received a grant, and we've been able to outfit all of our ambulances with ballistic vests and helmets and tactical medical gear. And we've begun tactical EMS training and drills in the community and with the police department. Up on the screen, you're able to see some of the gear that our firefighters and EMS personnel would wear to such an event. Secondly, we provide a variety of education to the schools. We believe taking a proactive approach in our line of work is very important. If you can imagine, instead of responding to an emergency, if we can provide a service and education that would prevent the emergency from happening in the first place, we'd be doing a much better job. Some of the other training and education that we provide, more recently we've done CPR, first aid, and stop the bleed training with all 3 school faculties and staff. The stop the bleed training specifically teaches everyday citizens life-saving bleeding control methods in the event that there's a shooting or a traumatic event. We've also distributed these stop the bleed kits throughout all 3 schools, and these contain medical equipment, including tourniquets and hemorrhage control equipment, so that they're readily available for bystanders in the event of such an emergency. Other programs we do for the schools involve CPR training for all 7th graders, and the intent behind that is so that every student coming through the Hooksett school system will come out with having trained in CPR. Various illness and injury prevention programs, fire prevention education, and lastly, specifically in the past 2 to 3 years, we've begun teaching drug and opioid education to the 7th grade health class, which has actually been worked into the curriculum and become an annual thing now. We believe that this early education, early on, about the dangers of opioid and drug use can be one of the best ways to combat this opioid crisis in the state. That's it.
A lot of sobering talk, huh? When you think about it. Hooksett is a good place to be a kid in a world where it's tough to be a kid. And there's nothing more important to me than the safety and well-being of your youngsters. I hope they get to read and write, and I hope that they learn to compute, but first and foremost, they're going to be safe. And I hope that one of the things that tonight has done is demonstrated to your parents that your kids' safety is a community effort. It's police and fire and school and state officials and retired Supreme Court justices. I get goosebumps all for the last hour and a half. I'm saying, I'm sitting here beside a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I probably appeared before you a couple of times in my youth. The state-of-the-art technology that we've been able to bring into the school district, with your support and with community support, and with accessing some infrastructure grant funding, that walkie-talkie system is not a toy. It's an important means of communication among all stakeholders, all the schools, and with my office as well. The shooter detection system, when you think about it, as impressive as it is, it's technology that was developed to identify the whereabouts of snipers in Afghanistan. And we have to install things like that in our schools. Sobering about the world that we are raising our kids in. The ongoing training and practice that you heard about tonight. The planning that goes into things. This was a great opportunity, I think, for us as a community to showcase what this community is all about. I'd like to really thank, first and foremost, you parents for your support and for coming out tonight. You probably don't realize that it did snow and there's a foot of snow out there. The panelists for preparing what they had to say to you tonight and really delivering some powerful messages. Judge Broderick, who, as I said before, you will remember this evening forever. The panelists will remain. You can feel free to mingle, to ask questions. We want it to be more informal than formal, and thank you for coming tonight. Thanks.
You have to give them the surveys on the way out.
Yes, like, okay, let's change this.
Sorry, I couldn't say. Thank you very much for coming. We reached Ward 2. Thank you for the talk. That was awesome. Very informative tomorrow. So, thank
Hi, Brian. Happy birthday. How are you? It's full day right now. Thank you.
Well, good. Thank you. They just don't know it Oh, yeah. Yeah, so actually, it's the training. Then again,
Yeah. Yeah, oh, yeah.
That was interesting.
Yeah, no, that's one of the reasons we say not to park. Yeah, so.
You will.
Yeah, I've done that. Yeah, it's one of them. Yeah, one of them is that. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Sorry.
Have a good day, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
That is something I would do.
Perfect, thank you.